Greetings from Cybertron. This is SoundJack here with another episode of SoundJack's Rambles. And today I'm joined by Miguel.
Hello.
And today we are here to talk about the IDW universe of Transformers comics. Yeah. IDW Publishing's 13-year run of the Transformers comic book series. Yeah, it's 13 years. It started out in 2005 and is just ended in November of 2018 with one wrap-up issue summarizing the entirety of the universe being published in January, this January. Yeah, it's a big thing. I'm just such at a loss for words because this was such a stable part of Transformers for years, and now it's over. It's just interesting to talk about it in such a context because who would have thought it would have ended?
Who would have thought that a series about robots that change shape would force you to accept that change has to happen?
That is fair. That is admittedly very fair. But anyway, before we get into it, how did we get introduced to it? Miguel, how did you get introduced to the IDW Transformers continuity?
So I had been aware of the IDW comics for probably since around when they first started. Like I can recall seeing them in stores. I think even as far back as the G.I. Joe, the Avengers crossover.
Oh yeah, that thing.
I remember that, and that was pretty early. I remember that being up on the wall of a card shop that also sold comics that I went to once for some Yu-Gi-Oh thing. Never really got into the comics or even like picked one up and read them up until around All Hell Megatron. Like I remember picking up a few issues of All Hell Megatron, jumping ahead a little later in that year, stuck in the mall for a while my family was shopping, ended up at the Borders, throwback to Borders, wandering into the manga and graphic novel section, and then they had a trade of Maximum Dinobots, and I picked that up. And actually, by that point, if it was the trade, it probably would have been 2009. But like, eventually picking up the trade for Maximum Dinobots, reading through that, and thinking, oh, this is really cool. The hubbub of Last Stand of the Wreckers, putting it more in sort of my radar. Or I'd pick up a trade maybe here and there, never really continuing through a series. But then it sort of all came to a head once the death of Optimus Prime. So the death of Optimus Prime leading into Robots in Disguise and More Than Meets the Eye, that's when I really started picking up the books through college and everything up until now.
Mm. As for me, first issues first issue comics I read from them were The Last Stand of the Wreckers. I've been getting more and more into Transformers at this point. And I think it was around this time I discovered T-Formers. And there were a lot of articles talking about like The Last Stand of the Wreckers and stuff like that. I'm like, oh, this sounds interesting. This sounds cool. I remember specifically at Christmas, I got an iTunes gift card and I downloaded the Transformers Comixology app and bought the trade paperback of Last Stand of the Wreckers. And then I think at some point I definitely like went back and read the TF Wiki summaries for all of those issues. Paying attention to it, and then when More Than Meets the Eye came about, started buying issues digitally again. Only for More Than Meets the Eye. I never read Robots in Disguise, but I still kept up with the summaries, what was going on in the story. And yeah, again, pretty much till the end. I say pretty much just because the app I bought them from apparently was discontinued from the Comixology service, and I wasn't able to buy comics with iTunes money anymore. So I just let that be then. But anywho, before we get into more, this is definitely much more of a retrospective than anything else, so we're not going to specifically be going over specific stuff. We're just going to talk about it as the whole, but I'm certain we will be talking about spoiler stuff. So if you do not want to be spoiled, especially on like the end of the IDW continuity stuff, you have been warned. Just putting that out there. Entirely possible you will get spoiled on that. So Miguel, where do you want to start talking about all of this?
I mean, like, what do you want to go in, like, any specific thing? Like, because we're not going over like the entirety of the continuity. What are we aiming to do here? Like, think of like best moments, sort of our thoughts on the continuity as a whole. Like, what? Yeah,
all that, pretty much. Just like how does IDW shape up now that it's all over?
I mean, and I think this could very easily have been said way before like it wrapped up. Maybe more so in the final years when it became very robust, just comics versus just being robust Transformers comics. I mean, I feel like it's safe to part of this goes to the fact that it lasted for so long. It's safe to say that IDW is probably one of the crowning jewels of the Transformers franchise in terms of storytelling. Part of that being you have there's so much time that they had to produce stories and everything. You have all these different types of stories. You have the early years where it was like with a lot of the spotlights, where it was a much more single issue character focus, but gave you the taste of this very already established, very alive world. And then the fact that it's comics, it's like you could tell these very deep, rich stories, not having to worry about, okay, what toy are we pushing this time around, or like what like we're targeting these to kids, because like I think from the get-go it's like, all right, modern G1 story, like let's do this, throw a bone to the older fans, bring in every little thing we can from different continuities, especially as the series or the sort of the publication further developed the different series that they had, like with Till 1, I can think specifically being like all the different homages. It just like taking it as one single unit, it's like this just labor of love, especially given the fact that a lot of the people who worked on it from the IDW side, like they were fans, they were fan artists and stuff who eventually got brought on board, or people who were carryovers from Dreamwave who could finally draw and color things and not have to be stuck with Pat Lee's house style. Which is always some of my favorite stuff whenever I encounter new stories about Pat Lee and about just like all the stuff that they had to deal with back when they were at Dreamwave. Like, that's always fun to read and just be like, like, this guy was horrible.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think, and like certainly there have been times where like the series may have waned a little bit, like the stories weren't as good as they could have been, or in like areas where they could have improved. But I think all in all, like, it was something that was always it's something where especially if people didn't like the current Transformers cartoons at the time. Probably specifically when we were getting more of like the injection of what eventually became Phase 2 with Nick Roche, James Roberts, John Barber, when they were really coming in, and just get like, I remember when Last Stand came out, and everyone was just like people weren't happy with the movies. They may have been okay with, like, at that point, like, it was that weird period where animated was about to end and Prime was coming out and no one knew what the hell that was going to be like. And just this whole thing of where it's like Last Stand comes out and everyone's like, this is really good. Like,
yes.
This isn't just good Transformers comic books. This is good comics.
Yes.
So I've always since that sort of that time, always looked at it as like it's a fun little area where they can explore different stories and everything. And then especially when you got into Phase 2 and their whole premise is basically like the war's over, it's like, what?
Yeah, because that's nothing we've dealt with before. I mean, technically in animated, the war
animated
was over.
Animated is the only other time that they really touched on. Animated in Beast Wars, the Beast era,
True.
are the only two times that, at least that I can remember, where for Transformers, it's basically like the war is over. Like,
but even in the shows themselves, even though the war is over, there's still factional loyalties. They still are fighting.
Right,
Autobots versus Decepticons.
And that's not to say that IDW didn't have it either, but the thing that they definitely focused on, which is something that normally isn't, is like, how does Cybertronian society rebuild itself post the war? Like, we get basically like a glimpse of the war is over now. What do we do to fix everything? Whereas other times, like with Beast Wars and Animated, it's like, all right, the war has been over, and we are establishing, and we have an established society, but here are the rumblings of like, oh, the Decepticons coming back, or like Predacons and Maximals not liking each other. This is the first time we're like, all right, the war's over, like everyone's coming back. Optimus has to leave, which then became a recurring theme. It was brought up again. Like we have it in the Prime Wars trilogy, where after in Titan's Return, Mistress of Flame asks Optimus, "Hey, do you want to come to the council?" And he's like, "Nope, I'm a wartime person. Like, I can't come back. Like, get Perceptor." What was the other? In RID 2015, Optimus, like towards the end of the show, spoilers for everything right now.
Yeah, spoilers for everything.
Optimus was like, "Oh no, like I can't step into the like Cybertronian government affair. Like, the people have to decide. Like, I'm here to protect the people of Cybertron, but I'm not to get involved with politics because I'm from like the war times."
Yeah.
So yeah, just a lot of different stuff that I think it makes for a very rich continuity that is there for people to just like get lost in and fall in love with. I think it's something that very much for people who might not be able to get into the cartoons or the movies or something. It's like here's like just a bunch of different series that you could like individual comic books, or here's like boom, here's a whole continuity.
Yeah,
13 or in plus years of just stuff. Go.
Indeed. There's so many places you can start. So many stories you can read. You can read all of them. You can read half of them. You can read just specific stories. There is something here if you can get behind the premise of giant alien robots that turn into Earth vehicles or vehicles, period. If you can't get into that, I don't know why you're on this channel.
On that, yes, then you're good.
Yeah. So much to agree with there. How's about now? Let's just look at the different sections and just look at them individually from a current standpoint, and maybe if you have a better idea from a then standpoint, since I'm not so familiar with some of the older stuff in terms of standpoints. This is more. This is going to be a little more than just Phase 1 versus Phase 2, but it's still going to be large swaths, because even in Phase 1 there are definitely clear divisions.
Right, you have the E.J. Sue, Simon Furman era, where you have the different Asian series along with the spotlights to supplement them. I think that's like your first section, if you want to call it.
Yeah.
Then you jump into the Mike Costa era. Your All Hell Megatron into
just the Transformers. That's all it was.
Yeah, the Transformers with You had like the Drift miniseries.
Yes.
Pop in, which who wrote that?
That was Shane McCarthy.
Right.
And then there were also a few other spotlight series with Transformers Bumblebee and Transformers Ironhide in that era too.
Mm-hmm. The weird times, as I like to call them, where especially they got really loose with controlling the art,
yeah.
You had times that even in the main series where it's like, oh, now everyone has their Sunbow character models, and it's like, what?
As opposed to like movie design or their ongoing design that they've had since Megatron or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I can't really speak much to the earlier, like the Asian series and like the early stuff. I didn't really read too much of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't know if you have anything to say on that front.
Nothing too specific for then. Now, I just want to talk. What do you feel of it now that everything has ended?
I mean, I don't know much of. I mean, it's definitely something that's interesting to go back to now after the sort of like you mentioned this before. I think it was before we started recording. How this series has been going on. Like there's been a longer period of Phase 2 than there was Phase 1.
Yeah.
So, kind of going back on that era, it's really interesting to see the things that were different, but also, the things that were different, but also how, the parts of the early continuity that they pick up on, now they started picking up on in Phase 2 to kind of harken back to those early moments.
Yes.
Like that's certainly something that's interesting to see.
And that's the main thing I was going to say. So much time has passed since the early stuff, but the early stuff has never been lost in the midst of everything happening. Even with all the stories being written, the writers still kept how this series started involved, at least to some extent. Or 13 became an incredibly significant aspect of Phase 2 stuff. The Magnificents even came back as a major player, and there's some things at the time that were not necessarily well received have been paved over and made a lot better.
They've been jettisoned into the sun. Or at least the attempt was, or the recognition was like, yes, this thing, we will send it into the sun.
We're on the same page, right?
Yes, I know we're talking. I don't want to get. I know what we're talking about.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think a lot of the goodwill that they built up towards the end, like this is me speaking as someone who none of the particular stories that they focused a lot in Phase 2, especially with a lot of representation and stuff, doesn't necessarily concern me. So I'm nowhere in regard an expert to this, but I feel just from a lot of what I've seen from people who are part of some of those demographics that started to hone in on LGBTQ plus and everything. That was another thing that a lot of I would hear from people who I knew who were into the comics of just like, I can't believe that the place I have to go for representation in media time and time again is Transformers comics, or I didn't think that my Transformers comics would eventually be showing me the stories that I also wanted to hear about people like me.
Mm-hmm.
This is me speaking on behalf of those other, like, as what those other people said, not saying that I am one of those people. I'm not. It's not a bad thing. I'm just like clearly delineating how I fit into this whole cornucopia.
Yeah.
But no, I think definitely just speaking to the like trying to throw a bone to the early stuff, try to weave in some of those early stories, plot points that may have never been picked up on, try to weave them back in, especially towards the end when you hit Unicron, or the end of
Lost Light,
and the end of Optimus Prime, which was sort of feeding into Unicron.
Yeah.
No, it's a lot of really, really cool stuff. A lot of good stuff. A lot of good.
And a lot of stuff definitely could have been lost from the early stuff after All Hail Megatron, especially with how the story was just kind of like meh with before, at least what it feels like reading it. Like in the aftermath, they definitely did stuff to tie it back in more, but like when All Hail Megatron hit, it was like boom, like what happened to what was beforehand? Where did this plot thread go? Where did that plot thread go? Now it's just the Decepticons have invaded the entirety of Earth. Okay, is the gist I get from it, which unfortunate for the story that Furman was trying to create, but. All those things, like, if that didn't happen, we might not have gotten what we do have.
Right.
For sure. But I think I want to take a quick pit stop on The Last Stand of the Wrecker, since that's the series that really got both of us into it, I would say. Like, you started with Maximum Dynamite and picked up here and there, but Last Stand of the Wreckers was where you were. Just, and again, not to talk about the whole thing, but like the impact.
Well, it's not so much really. It's not so much on the impact it had on me, but more so just the impact that I saw at the time that it had on the fandom.
That's the thing.
Like, I remember just like the main thing is just like either going. I wasn't on Twitter at the time, but just going on the message boards, or listening to the WTF TFW podcast, which and kind of hearing it from there, just how beloved, and then even just seeing it post, like more so like firsthand accounts of people's love for Wreckers, and then continues with the fact that like what is it? We got Sins and then Requiem. It's something that like I've gone back and read it a couple of times, and just like reading it, it's just like, no, it's a good. It has a lot of that flair of the early stuff that I feel like was lost at that point, of where you get. Your focus is on characters. You start to kind of in the background start to build the. It's like have hints of a greater story behind the story you're telling, or like pockets of like references to unseen events where you're like, that seems interesting, but it's also like, we don't really need to focus on that right now. We'll table it, come back to it later.
Mm-hmm.
And just because a lot of times I'll have Megatron. Part of that is the fact that I think it stems sort of from for how the Autobots are, where they're kind of at the time the Autobots and the humans are both not sure what's happening. Like the Decepticons have all the cards. Like even the reader, you're just like, what's happening? Like the Decepticons took over the Earth. Like the last time we saw everyone else, like they defeated or later on, it's like, oh, what happened to Hunter? Like, where are the Autobots like friends? Like we were dealing with the machination or the machination or whatever you want to call them. And now the Decepticons took over. Like what? And hell, even like thinking back to then, where it was like the idea, like what was it, Spotlight? I forget what Spotlight it was, where or issue where Soundwave is like he was stuck in like.
Oh yeah. Well, I think that was Spotlight Soundwave.
It was Spotlight Soundwave where he's stuck. He's stuck in cassette mode because he showed up at the Earth in the 80s, and he's stuck in cassette mode in like a thrift store.
Yep.
It's like thinking now to where Soundwave went and where he introduced. We're like, oh yeah, there's Soundwave stuck inside of a store. But yeah, Last Stand, I feel like recaptured a lot of that early magic that later on the writers and all of the creatives who took over knew to reintroduce or to like focus on and take it further.
Yeah.
With the series.
Indeed. So much of Last Stand the Records was so pivotal and important with what came after. And let's get into what came after. Phase 2. Death of Optimus Prime, the 125th issue by IDW happens. The series is into the next phase. Optimus, the war's over. Autobot Decepticon neutrals living on Cybertron. Optimus is left. Rodimus seeks to take a crew into space to find the Knights of Cybertron, and Bumblebee, Metalhawk, and Starscream figure out how to run Cybertron. And boy, did More Than Meets the Eye really take off. Like, Robots in Disguise has always been very good. It's the thing, though, that More Than Meets the Eye, out of the two, definitely received more recognition for its stories, its characters, even in comic accolades. You've mentioned that these are just good comics, and it's not just people who are Transformers fans think so. It's people who do comics for a living are like, yes, these are all very good comics. And boy, so much goodness comes out of it. And then we get Dark Cybertron. Miguel? Where are your feelings in regards to this first section of Phase 2?
I mean, More Than Meets the Eye, I definitely loved a lot of the early stuff with More Than Meets the Eye. Like just the sort of the mystery, the intrigue, the a lot of the stuff that we would eventually get would pay off like years down the line. I definitely feel that the early, like, More Than Meets the Eye started off very strong, where RID maybe stumbled a little bit, kind of didn't get its footing quite as fast, but then I think that both series eventually meet in the middle, and personally, I've always been of the mind that as the train passes by, with a bunch of people coming to beat me up with what I'm about to say, I think as More Than Meets the Eye, and this is kind of jumping ahead beyond, like maybe not so much like when Dark Cybertron hit, but I say Dark Cybertron's Dark Cybertron's a hot mess. Dark Cybertron's a complete hot mess.
We can agree on that.
Coming out of Dark Cybertron is when both series kind of flipped for me, where I felt RID became a lot stronger. Especially, what is it? What was the tagline? Dawn of the Autobots? Was that what?
I think so because
I have all 3 issues of Windblade Volume 1, RID, and More Than Meets the Eye, with the each of the respective leaders at the time, Windblade, or like brand facing characters, Windblade, Megatron, and Optimus. I have the issues over there. I bought them, and then soon after I went to New York Comic Con, spoke with John Barber for a little bit, realized it was him, and then was very upset that I didn't bring any of my comics, because I looked around and I was like, there's Alex Milne, I forget I forget who else was there. I know Milne was there. I think some of the maybe I'm blanking on his name. Andrew Griffith, I think he was there. There were a lot of people there, and I was really upset. I was like, damn it, didn't bring anything. Anyone to sign. But yeah, the first bit of it, the political intrigue on Cybertron and everything was really cool. I looking back, I feel like a lot of the Decepticons, especially the ones who would end up becoming so important, were very boring at that. I can Needle Nose, the focus then was Needle Nose, but then I think to I always think to how Shockwave and Soundwave were really not used at all, and then I'm both of them become some pretty interesting characters towards the end. That I'm if only they were starting to kind of get their footing.
Yeah.
But you have any thoughts?
I'm not completely on board with your statement of the complete flip after Dark Cybertron. Though, More Than Meets the Eye definitely strong. Robots in Disguise not as much. I don't think they flipped. They did not flip for me after Dark Cybertron. It was after the rebrand, or the
and I'll
more
say
so.
That More Than Meets the Eye wasn't a complete downhill type of thing.
No,
it kind of just had a lot of peaks and valleys. Whereas, Robots in Disguise, eventually just becoming the Transformers, had if it did peak and valley a little bit, it wasn't as dramatic. There were times where I would go back, read between read a couple issues of More Than Meets the Eye and think this is great, and then read a couple issues and be what is happening? And then the other thing that personally I always felt was the thing that I liked about Robots in Disguise when it turned into the Transformers, especially when Windblade started coming out, and then we eventually got to R1.
Yes,
is how those two very much, it felt like it's okay, these are two separate comics that are happening within the same universe, and it's cool because it's expanding on this. But then More Than Meets the Eye and eventually Lost Light always felt like it was happening in almost its own microcosm, which was good for the book itself. But at the end of the day, I was I'm also here for this overall continuity, this overall IDW Transformers like big narrative like series.
Yeah.
And it was one of those things where I always felt like More Than Meets the Eye feels like it's its own comic book, but Transformers are also part of it. Whereas the other two and like all the other series that cropped up always felt like, oh no, these are just really good. These are, well, it's not like these are really good stories, but they're also, in a lot of the times, really good Transformer stories. So that's where
I understand. I definitely understand that.
I like a lot of, there were times it's like basically I was always there more for like Transformers stories, but then like I also recognize like More Than Meets the Eye, good stories, like even if you just rip off Transformers, no, it's still good stuff. And then you get to Lost Light and stuff changes, unfortunately.
Yeah. There's that. I definitely feel the Optimus Prime overall better than Lost Light in my personal taste. But Lost Light was still really good in my opinion. But yeah, a lot was going on over in on the Lost Light and all that jazz. No, not Jazz, because Jazz was in Jazz was very important in Optimus Prime and that XRID because he was the big political problem for the Autobots.
Yeah, it's like Jazz killed a man. It's like,
Yep.
Damn it, Jazz.
Damn Jazz, you had one job and was to not kill a human. And now, whenever we talk to the president's like, "You killed one human," and we're like, "We're sorry." How many did Megatron kill?
Doesn't matter. You killed one.
Yep.
And it's like, what if we tell them Megatron's an Autobot now? It's like, I think that'll backfire.
Okay, but then Soundwave was able to be like, "Hey, that was Megatron that killed the humans. The rest of us Decepticons, we were just following orders. How about you align with us against the Autobots?" I'm just saying. But I am glad Soundwave, with the story I saw with Soundwave, very pleased with where everything went. I definitely, and I think the reason for me the Robots in Disguise / Volume 2, the Transformers Volume 2, was not as such a step in improvement was because Windblade until the Windblade stuff was going on, and to an extent, to me, that's more following off the first season of Robots in Disguise with that whole political intrigue on Cybertron, which was really cool to see to me. With then the RID actually just going like, "Oh, yep, Optimus is in charge of Autobots. They're going to Earth, and they're going to do a whole new thing over there." Again, not saying that was bad or anything. I'm just saying I was able to better follow the Windblade story and then the More Than Meets the Eye story than I initially was of the Robots in Disguise stuff. Though that also gets confusing later when we have what was it? Revolution? Revolutionaries? Revolution?
Oh, yeah, that whole thing. I don't want to talk. Not that I don't want to talk about it. I can't because I skipped all of that because I was like, this doesn't seem this feels and seems very dark Cybertron.
Yeah.
And not in like in a bad way, in probably a worse way. And I was like, I'm not gonna touch it. So that's one thing where like the one thing that I do like that came out of a lot of that was we eventually got Rom and the Transformers, or Rom versus the Transformers, whatever it was.
Yes.
I loved that series. I loved that series.
Indeed, that was
but everything else that came, like, and part of maybe I'll eventually, I want to sort of get all the different, I don't know how exactly I'd do it, but I want to kind of get like the trades of all of the different stuff, because a lot of what stuff that I own is mostly digital. I'd love to have the trades and everything, and kind of have them all physically. So I definitely want to eventually go back, and then I'll probably pick up some of that and just kind of see what I missed, kind of plug those holes, and like,
yeah,
down the line decide, okay, let's see what this was all about. But like during it, I was just like, I'm gonna save that money and go buy me like a chicken sandwich or something.
Yeah, there are definitely characters that were introduced because of Revolution that I enjoyed having be involved in the story. But I like that more like how Marissa Fairborn or Garrison Blackrock are there, as opposed to like, oh, hey, look at this completely separate brand, and here's us shoving it into what already exists. In terms of the fiction, like, you can introduce new characters, that's completely fine, but this was definitely a Hasbro mandate.
Part of me wants to say that some of the decision to cross everything over may have, in part, been an IDW not decision, but at least a throwing it out there, like, could this work, type of thing. So I don't want to put all the blame to Hasbro. It definitely was something that like Hasbro would have probably been all over, be like, oh yeah, sure, and maybe they threw in some extra properties that IDW wasn't necessarily thinking they would be tackling. Yeah. So
the one I definitely like, wait, what the heck did they do, was the Micronauts.
Micronauts was weird, and I think Mask. I don't know necessarily who they decided, hey, let's push Mask. Although I think Hasbro may have at least been trying to do it more, since they've been trying to figure out what to do with Mask. G.I. Joe is like, okay, sure, like throw Joe in. Mask.
Though the only one with that problem is like, oh hey, G.I. Joe exists, but where the heck were they during Megatron's invasion of Earth? Because all of the story, because there was IDW G.I. Joe stuff that had happened.
Oh, what is it? I think the explanation is that all happens
since All Hail Megatron.
Or that happened before.
It was before? Okay.
It all happened before, or it all, yeah, if I remember right, it all happened within like the span of like a year of All Hail Megatron.
Oh, right. It happened during All Hail Megatron. Wait, was it? Wait, hold on.
It was like right before into All Hail Megatron, and then all hell breaks loose.
Okay.
Because I think the explanation was like, if G.I. Joe was running around, why did we never see them dealing with the Transformers? It's like, no, because all their adventures pretty much happened beforehand, and then they got shut down or whatever, and then All Hell Megatron happened, and then they got reabsorbed into like different places, and then now,
yeah. Of
course, who knows? Someone in the comment section would be like, Miguel's wrong.
Yeah. If anyone watches the video to this point, comment down below if you got to this point of the video, please. Please, I want to know you're watching. Again, ROM was really good to have there. A bunch of the G.I. Joe characters were really cool to have involved in this. The rest, I'm not... Yeah. Visionaries was odd, though important in the overall story. Micronauts, I'm still like, wait, were they even involved in Unicron at all? They probably were. I just cannot even. But that never affected More Than Meets the Eye Lost Light, except for one crossover issue, which was a strange time. But then, yes, indeed, we had we also had Sins of the Wreckers and Requiem of the Wreckers. That do they not have Requiem on this list? I mean, Sins of the Wreckers on this list. I'm looking at the TF Wiki page. I don't think they have Sins on here. Oh, they do. I missed it. It was before. It's earlier than I thought. But it's so nice taking a look at Sins and Requiem that story has its own continuation and conclusion. Because, like, Last Stand of the Wreckers itself, a very solid series, a very solid stuff. But as happened with the other stories, there was more they could build on, and they did, and that was all very good and very solid. And allowed to help wrap up a few things, for sure. How are your thoughts on those two stories?
No, I like that Wreckers got its chance to continue to expand on its own little like section of the continuity and the stories, and then kind of to get a bookend type of thing, like especially given the fact that it certainly was its own little thing that none of the other stories really encroached on. So to get its chance to be like, all right, here's our say, I thought was really good.
Yeah, for sure. Then definitely the end of the universe. Optimus Prime, Lost Light, and Transformers Unicron. So much build-up, so much concern, but overall, it all felt like a really good send-off. Is that what your thoughts are for that movie?
Yeah, I'd agree.
Lost Light itself, probably first. The end of it, at the very least. They finished up everything James Roberts was able to tell. Got the big question out of the way about Rung and what he is, or who he is, or both, actually. Has a final issue that, even after everything that was going on with Lost Light, felt true to what I think a lot of people saw in the series in More Than Meets the Eye. Because I definitely was seeing people at the time being like, I haven't been paying attention to Lost Light. Lost Light's been weird and whatnot. There have been missteps. But even that last issue was so good for that series. Because it felt like the best parts. Do you agree?
In I felt like the end of Lost Light, it felt like a good ending. Well, it felt like a good ending, and it felt like a proper ending for Lost Light. I don't necessarily know if it would have been like the proper ending. I would have that whole final arc, as far as a send off to More Than Meets the Eye. I don't necessarily know that I would agree that that was a good bookend for the entire series if you want to go all the way back to the beginning.
Okay. I do think I changed my direction in what I was saying. Like the last arc did finish it off, but that final issue more so was the whatever happened before felt like a true more than meets the eye issue. At the very least, that last issue. The other stuff, yeah. Do you get what I'm saying, or am I being confusing?
So not so much the final, the
final arc, but the final issue.
Just the final issue.
Yeah, I switched. Okay. I switched my train tracks in the middle of my thought process. I realize now. Like, I'm glad at the end. Yeah, I'm still glad that the last arc got the big questions out of the way.
Yes.
The last arc got the big questions out of the way. But the last issue, I personally thought was really good. Even though you can definitely have quabbles about like, oh, why is everyone sad now? Everyone's so sad in that issue for various reasons. But let's hop on to that end of Optimus Prime and Unicron. Shockwave has revealed he is still alive despite Dark Cybertron. He has been playing Cybertronian history for millennia to his advantage to achieve his true objective of just making Cybertron live forever. And decides to do it through Unicron. Anywho, definitely that whole arc definitely strong, and for that. And what do you say?
No, I'd agree. Like the final stretch of Optimus Prime issues, the Falling, is that what it was called?
I believe that's what it was.
I say this as if I don't have the stack of comics with all of the issues over. I'm staring at them right now, but I can't be bothered to get up and look at them. Like that whole arc was like I picked it up. Like I picked up one of them like physically, and I was just like, I have to get this whole thing. Like there's no ifs, ands, or buts. I need all of these physically. I need this whole series, or this whole like arc, and no, just really, really solid. Really enjoyed everything that I read. The whole thing with the like. Towards the end, it was kind of, I guess people were kind of done, or at least some people were kind of not okay with Shockwave always ending up being, it's like, Shockwave's done it again. But like seeing that issue and then reading and then just seeing like him show up and just be like, oh, like old friend, and then like the next issue, him banishing Optimus into the
to the infraspace.
Yeah, infraspace and everything, like, and just like seeing him in the Onyx armor and then just being like, what? And then the sort of deconstruction of the Prime mythos, and then just like kind of the realization. Because I remember earlier on there were a lot. I had seen a lot of criticism about the fact that IDW had seemingly had to absorb what was seen as the failings of the Aligned continuity, and it's like, oh, now you're stuck with this mythos because we couldn't make it work in our TV shows. And then IDW, I get like I kind of subscribe to this sort of almost conspiracy theory of John Barber just being like, all right, you're giving me this, but I get to play with it. And then he's like, all right, you know what? All right, fine, we'll have your primes. But guess what? They're all lies. Because Shockwave made it up. And all this stuff. And I'm just like, you know what? That's beautiful. That's truly, truly beautiful. Yep. The way that you've done this and set this up.
Indeed.
The fact that it's like just really attacking or not attacking, but just kind of like deconstructing all of these creation myths that were set up, and then just kind of presenting them as like, no, there's logical reasons for a lot of it, or at least there's logical reasons for everything that we show you here. But then there's still stuff where it's like, we're like, who made the planet, like, or like, how'd the planet come to be, like, Vector Sigma, like, there's still these enigmatic
things,
and then just like, oh, like, what, like, really, what does happen after a spark is extinguished? Like, where do people go? Like, there's still these things that are left unanswered, and I think they're the deeper parts of Transformers lore that haven't really been, some parts that have never been further explored when you do present. Like, Animated was a good example. Animated kept a lot of things mysterious, but then explained some things. Like, IDW did a lot of things where, in the end, it's like, there's still some questions. There's still some stuff. And then, in the end, there's really no... It's like, in the end, it's more in, like, the power of the stories themselves than really trying to figure out, like, what is the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of stuff, I think. I'm getting to the part where I'm just babbling.
No, yeah. It's all good. It's all good. Babble is like, it's called Rambles for a reason.
What the heck is this? I've just opened a Make Toys Buster Stealthwing and have proceeded to remove all of his parts in the attempt to combine them with the Make Toys Striker Manus to form like the Jet Power Optimus form that they can do. Although I've come to the realization that my Striker Manus is not with me at the moment, so I just have a bunch of Jetfire parts in their combined mode, waiting for an Optimus.
Oh, fun. Oh, geez. Though I gotta say, the deconstruction is interesting. In the Optimus Prime Unicron, when the Lost Light doesn't necessarily do the same. Like, the gods that he established are not true deities, but like Primus does exist.
Right, but I guess it's a twofold thing of where, like, and the other one, it's like, oh, the demystification of the Prime, like, because that was the other thing. It was like competing narratives of like, oh, it's like the Primes are gods, but then you also have the Guiding Hand and Primus and all that. And it's like, where does all this fit? And it's like, oh, this is how it all fits together. It's like, these people were real, or it's like, everyone was real, but these are what these are the lies that were told, or the stories that were made up.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what truly happened.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, but what came before that?
Yeah.
And it's like, who knows?
Yeah. The big thing, yes, Primus did exist. Yes, the Guiding Hand did exist. Not in the way that the myth presented them, to the same degree. But we still don't know how Primus came to be in the first place. That's the only thing we do not know.
Yeah, it's like, how did Cybertron show up? Like, all of this other stuff. Like, why? Like, a lot of the whys. It's like, okay, then, well, like, why could the Matrix do? Why could the Matrix do what it did? Like, all these stuff. It's like, and it's stuff that it's like you could ask these questions. I don't necessarily know that we'll ever get the answers to them, and I don't necessarily think that we really need to.
No. Considering what J-Ro has responded to, it's entirely possible he has things that he could say. But regardless, would still be just authorial intent.
Well, yeah, people, yeah, but I mean, like, as far as like what the story presented, it's like,
yeah,
we were given. I would imagine we were given a lot of what we were going to be given and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Do you think if a series continued after Unicron, that they would go to explore such deeper questions as where Cybertron came from, where sparks come from?
I honestly don't know. I mean, I don't know that we. I think a lot of what the answers. I guess that's assuming that after Unicron, like magically, they were like, oh hey, well no, we're not rebooting. We're continuing from this.
No, yeah.
I think if Unicron hadn't happened, a lot of the revelations and everything that we got definitely would have been different. We would have had a more slow burn on a lot of stuff, especially from the Lost Light side of things. I'm not really sure. Excuse me. Oh my god. I don't know what's happening. I'm melting from the inside. I don't know how the main series, like Optimus Prime, I don't know how that would have played out. That's something that I feel like there's been a lot of something I say is like, I wonder, there's been a lot of panels with James Roberts. Why haven't there been any with John Barber? It's like, oh no, John Barber is editor-in-chief of IDW. He can't go to fan conventions.
Yep. Yeah. He's a biz boy. He's a busy
There
boy.
was that sweet spot where he was a freelance writer and left IDW. That it was like, all right, bring him to the conventions.
Yep.
If he ever enters a state where he can speak onto like what would have happened, like where would Optimus Prime gone if
Unicron wasn't a thing?
If Unicron wasn't going to happen, like that's something I'm curious to know.
Yeah.
But
and the question I had asked was definitely like just an if. There's never a question of could it happen. It's never going to happen. I was just like, could it be? It's similar to an extent since we were talking about before, like season 5 of Steven Universe has ended, and the writers have come out saying this is where we intended the series to end, and being like, well, what the heck can you talk about now? Because what could they talk about now? Truly, I mean, you could talk about after like the building of Earth up as a true colony and seeing, but where do the stories come from there? So I definitely feel like this was a good end to the whole of this 13-year crazy story. Which has made such an impact on not just the fiction, but the fandom, and to an extent, the look outside, because just, again, how well received some of these comics have been in the outside comic community. Not the largest group of fiction, for sure, not the most recognized fiction that is presentable, for sure, but golly gee, this has been a ride. Do you have any final thoughts on the IDW Transformers? Version 1, I guess, to call it.
Version 1. I think jumping off of that, definitely to any listeners out there who maybe came in, or their fandom was sustained through the IDW Transformers comics, I will say, like, welcome. Happy to see you all here, especially a lot of younger people. There's been I've seen some talk before of like this whole question of like there's such an influx of people of a bunch of different backgrounds and everything from the IDW comic, given all of the amounts of representation and just accessibility of being able to be introduced to Transformers through the comics. Of like, are all these people going to leave? And I think a testament I've seen is like this pocket. I say pocket. It's seems to be a very large concentration of people who love this very specific part of the greater Transformers franchise. I feel like they're here to stay. I feel like a lot of them are here to stay. I feel like a lot of them are on board for what's coming next, or may even like stay where they are and just continue to love the IDW franchise, like the first
version 1
of the IDW continuity. Whatever happens with the reboot happens, and maybe people will jump ahead and be like, "Oh, this is great too." Some people might be like, "You know, I'm gonna stick where I am with version 1," or they're gonna go elsewhere and be like, "Oh, let me check out the cartoons that I missed. Maybe revisit some stuff from when I was a kid. Let me check out Cyberverse," like stuff like that. There's such an influx of people as far as fan creatives and everything. Like, I think that's in part a lot of the biggest testament to the legacy of IDW is the amount of fans that it was able to bring in, not from the good storytelling, the good artwork, the accessibility of both the stories and the characters, and just the representation that it had. I think in the end, there's a lot of positives, and it's a really interesting time in the fandom in the past few years, given the fact that the most vocal, like the main part as far as fiction that we've had to look forward to in terms of positivity, has been mostly the IDW comics. That's where I feel like a lot of people have focused a lot of their attention on, while maybe letting RID 2015 fly under the radar, and then the movies are the movies.
Yeah. No, yeah. Agreed. Yeah, definitely. Definitely agree with the RID 15 kind of feels like it fell under the radar. I still enjoyed it, but like I liked reading the comics more. And then movies for movies. That's that old jazz business. I gotta stop saying jazz because I can't confuse it with the Transformer. Wonder how the interaction would be with Cyberverse running if IDW was still running at the same time. With that kind of like, who would like it more? But yeah, the impact to the fandom as a whole definitely feels like it's staying. Definitely feels like it's still here, whether they continue on in the other series or not. I've talked to people that have been introduced because of it, and I was on the quick TFCon story, even though I still have to friggin' post my vlog of it. I got on the bus to go to the airport. I got on this family from Maine and Flint Dilly. Is that how you pronounce his name?
Dilly, I think, yeah.
Yeah. And him and the girl from the family were chatting a little bit, and he noticed she had a pin. And she definitely came in because of More Than Meets the Eye, because it was a pin of wrong, and he was trying to be like, wait, who? Because I feel like he hasn't been keeping up, but she was just talking like, oh yeah, wrong, because like everyone knows wrong, and and then I got talking to her just about the series in general, and she's like, oh yeah, I'm planning on going backwards and going back through the series. I started with Prime. I'm going to do animated, then the Unicron trilogy, and then Beast Wars, and I think she was even going to look at the Japanese stuff and then get to G1 finally. But stuff has happened. People have come into the fandom because of this whole thing. And I am glad for the beneficial impacts that is left on the fandom and people's perceptions of this whole thing. Geez, why are my words not coming out? The representation, the acceptances, Transformers definitely feels like good story for representation that of LGBTQ plus all that good stuff, all bringing more people to the fandom, more of that kind of that group of just caring and supportive and accepting. And it's really nice to see that they are there and that they are staying, because it's good to hear. It's very good. It's very good to hear that they're all still here. And see that they're still here even. I'm certain going to if I go to TFCon, I'm certain I want to go. Definitely going. What am I saying? That there will still be a lot of people. There will still be a lot of IDW cosplays. The only thing I would say is I do wish that the Robots in Disguise, XRID, Optimus Prime received more greater recognition, because like Tailgate toy design, Brainstorm toy design, Nautica getting a toy. We get a lot of that from the Morts and Meets the Eye stuff, but we don't get new toys of characters like Aileron or the design of Soundwave that appeared. We got the Prime design, but it's Optimus. What do you expect? I would just like in years to come more specific characters from that series to be more overall recognized in the greater fandom, I would say. But I think that's all we have to say on the IDW Transformers comics. The version 1. We say that because there is a version 2 that shall start having bi-monthly issues, two issues a month, starting in March. I'm very interested to see how that goes. I'll just ask this quick question in anticipation of the version 2. Since it's very toy focused, Miguel, do you think it's only going to exist as long as the toy line exists, or do you think they're just using that as the basis and then it's going to spin off on its own?
No, I think they're only using the designs because those are the current toy designs. Like, that's not something that is new for IDW. Back during All Hell Megatron, they did it with a lot of the designs. If there was a modern toy, they used it. It's pretty much the first time, and then a lot of the other, like, every now and again they would have toys that were either loosely or very explicitly based off of, or they had designs that were very loosely or explicitly based off of toy designs. Maybe they'll be a bit closer with it, certainly. Like, they're picking up the setting and everything that the toy line has, but I think they'll have just as, maybe not just as much, but they'll probably have plenty liberty to do what they want.
Mm-hmm. Which is good, because I'm glad for the liberty they've had in this. And IDW had in a lot of this. Especially with the representation and stuff. That was very good. Though whenever Hasbro was like, hey, do this, you could tell. To an extent. Dark Cybertron and all that nonsense. But still overall, very, very, very good. Very glad to have been there for the ride, I will say. But that is all we have to say for IDW Transformers version 1. Miguel, where can people find you?
People can find me on Twitter at Logos Minor. Do you have anything you want to say, or just want to follow and see the few times that I actually share my thoughts versus just like shouting random nonsense into the ether? Then yeah, give me a follow.
And you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram as well at SoundJack426. But you should also subscribe to this channel and like and comment and share this video if you enjoyed it. I do also have a Patreon account if you want to help support the channel. The link for that will be in the description down below. Thanks for tuning in. This is SoundJack and Miguel signing off.